Welcome to the Atlantic Bridge podcast, politics viewed from both sides of the pond. My name is Stefan Sasse, and with me is my co-host Emmett Booth.
So, we speak to you from inside the abyss. Yesterday, the unthinkable happened. Donald Trump won the presidency of the United States, and he will now be part of our lives and part of our policies every day for at least 4 years. And that is the planet we live in. It'd be nice to be in the alternate dimension that split off from this one, but sadly this is the one we got. So we're going to be talking today about our immediate reactions to it, why we think it happened, and why we and everyone else got it so wrong, and how we think it's going to impact the presidency, the country, and the major political parties going forward. And then hopefully, Stefan can offer us all a place to stay for the next 4 years, because we're definitely going to need it. We can't all run to Canada, poor bastards. Although they have lots of land, so maybe we can. Anywho, so my initial reaction as last time unfolded was, panic, denial, disbelief, and a gradual sink into depression. I'm not as angry as I thought I'd be. I'm just very, very sad. It's heartbreaking to realize that so much of such good work done over the course of the Obama administration is about to vanish. Personally, my healthcare is doomed, so that's going to be an interesting thing I'm going to have to deal with. But so much great work on climate change, on civil rights, on banks, on any issue you care to name. It's all about to burn, and that is terrible, and it's going to impact a lot of people's lives in a lot of devastating ways, which we're going to see have this ripple effect to come. And of course, our national character and influence and perception is going to change radically. So yeah, how did you feel specifically as someone who pays a lot of attention to American politics but isn't an American citizen yourself? How did it feel watching us do this to ourselves?
Catastrophic. I was a little bit hampered in my reactions by the time difference, of course.
I was thinking.
So just to give you a quick narrative of how my election night played out, I was in the center, in the German American Center's election night event in Stuttgart, Germany, where we got to watch debates between clever people like professors for American studies and the heads of the Democrats and Republicans abroad and overseas, sure, and stuff like that. And then at around 2 o'clock in the night, 2 a.m., the first results began to pour in. So we were glued to CNN screen, and all attention was on Florida, basically, because that was the first thing sign for which something like reliable numbers were getting in. Other than the states you knew how they would fall, like Indiana, Kentucky came in early, obviously, and Vermont, but that was all priced in. So Florida was the first thing, and when it remained incredibly close at around 3 a.m. in the morning, I started to get a bad feeling. Mm-hmm. But it still wasn't over. But I had this feeling, she's losing Florida, and North Carolina is also not looking well. So, Clinton firewall. This will be a close election, like 280, 290 votes, not at least in the ballpark that I expected. And at around 3:15 in the morning, I hopped into my car, got home. And when I got home, the last news before I went to bed at around 4 a.m., 4:15, was that Clinton won Virginia, I think. Or was this morning? It all conflates.
It all blurs together.
And then I got to sleep for 2.5 hours, and then I woke up to the news that the election basically was lost. Mm-hmm. And I haven't recovered since. I have to say, I'm totally struck by what happened, because every forecast, pretty much every poll had Clinton winning this thing easily. Pennsylvania had +7 for Clinton. She led in every battleground state by comfortable margins, and now you see Wisconsin go and Michigan and it is all so much to take in, and I have been trying over the day not to engage in premature analysis, getting out all those narratives from, Clinton was a bad candidate and it's all the stupid voters for Trump and what have you. And it is really hard. I'm still feeling physically ill from the results, because I have been following this very closely for 1.5 years now, and I put quite a lot of emotional stakes in it.
Yep.
But of course, this doesn't even compare to someone who is actually having to live under the impact.
Sure. The tendrils will extend across the globe. Europe's going to have to deal with an American president who's not too sure about that whole NATO idea now. And that's certainly going to have an impact on you guys and on Russia going forward. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in Putin's inner sanctum today. I'm sure the reactions must be delightful. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of narratives flying around, and it's easy to jump on one or the other as it suits you. I think we have to, wait a little bit more before we can reach anything close to a firm conclusion about why this went down the way it did and why, like you say, pretty much every forecaster got it so wrong. For my part, again, I knew Hillary Clinton was a flawed candidate. I knew she had a lot of things that I didn't like about her, that a lot of things that a lot of other people really, really didn't like about her. The reason I backed her over Bernie in the primaries because I was looking at the job of what the next Democratic president was likely to be like. And of course, we talked about this a ton, and I talked about this elsewhere. And it looked to me like it was going to be in terms of, cementing, preserving, and expanding upon, where possible, the Obama legacy. And that was going to be largely done through the various levers of the executive branch and the kind of power and resources you can call upon to do so, because Congress seemed likely to remain gridlocked for the foreseeable future. And so, given that, I thought Hillary would do a better job at that job than Bernie. Ideologically, as I've also said many times, I'm definitely much closer to Bernie than Hillary Clinton in terms of where I come from politically and what got me to care about things. I'm more in the left camp than the neoliberal camp on the whole, but purely in terms of what that job looked like and what I thought the Democratic Party needed to do in the next presidency, I thought Hillary fit that better. Now that she's lost, and now that a lot of the Obama legacy is about to vanish, now the variables change, because now the Democratic Party needs the energy and capacity to roll back everything Trump is going to be doing and to try and rebuild what Obama did better. So now at this point, after that loss, I think the Democratic Party, again, purely in terms of organizational strength, might need to make a decisive break with neoliberalism. Not about, condemning Hillary because she messed it up, or about condemning the Clintons in general, but purely in terms of what kind of party the party needs to be now in terms of getting its goals across. I think it needs to go left. And, we'll see what they do in the days ahead, but again, it's too early to grab onto one singular narrative entirely. But that's where my instincts lead me to say that, that there were definitely flaws with Hillary, but in terms, I thought she fit an overall moment that is now not happening. So now that that's not happening, I think the party needs to move in a different direction. But that's not me saying I think I was wrong to back Hillary over Bernie, because I still think if she'd have won, she would have made a better overall president than he would have if he had won, especially given, again, Congress in Republican hands. But going forward, I think the Democrats will find much more room to play into their left at this point, and we will see, though.
This is one of the big points about why I have problems with this election result on a very deep level, because it basically showed me that I, with my opinions, are not on the right side of history, but rather I'm an endangered minority, and this has ripple effects on my own national elections here too, of course. So what is churning me around for the whole day now is the thought: what can I do what do I need to sacrifice to once again get to be part of a majority? Which of my cherished beliefs will I have to let go? Because I don't think just, doubling down will do us that much good.
Well, I think, doubling down on... I'm not talking... Yeah, in terms of building a majority, that's the median voter theorem, right? That if you want to build a coalition, you do what you like you say, you sacrifice just enough to get enough of the middle to act up to 51%. And that might be true, but again, I'm thinking about purely in terms of how the Democrats stick together as a party and how they accomplish what they need to do under Trump and after Trump. And I don't think the Clinton model or the neoliberal model as a whole is going to be particularly useful in that regard. I think... Yeah, go ahead.
I absolutely agree on this part. I think where I take my main issue with is the old left-right dichotomy, because I don't think that cuts it anymore. Yes, as we have seen with Trump, breaking with neoliberalism is in terms of voter mobilization, in terms of vote getting, almost a no-brainer. I think the traditional brand of globalization with the WTO and deregulation and international trade deals and all that kind of stuff is pretty much dead now. And the sooner Democrats realize this and develop their own brand of left-wing economic populism, the sooner they will get out of the hole they're currently in.
Agreed.
This is a development that has been pretty apparent for some time now, but I have to say I underestimated the impact of it. And this is, of course, where we cue to Bernie Sanders, because while I definitely share your sentiment about Clinton making the better president if she had won, I was always of the opinion that Bernie Sanders wouldn't have won against Donald Trump, and I'm still not quite sure whether or not he would have. We will never know, because This is a counterfactual, and too much information is simply not available. As we have seen, a year-long campaign tends to peel layers back that even the candidates didn't know were there. So there's no telling how a Bernie Sanders or a Joe Biden would have fared in this election. It might be they would have been better than Clinton. It might be they would have even been worse. We simply don't know. But one has to definitely give Sanders' main core message of economic inequality much more electoral weight than we did. I think seeing ourselves as part of the Democratic Party establishment, we were a little bit too glib in discarding this, as a theoretical college student debate club issue that on the real policy level has no future. And this was certainly true in the short term. If you are Hillary Clinton and you're making your campaign strategy, which I still don't think was wrong, and you come to the conclusion that economic populism isn't going to win you anything, because Republicans are going to keep the House, and the House is where economic policy is made. So this is basically a non-starter. This remains a true analysis. It will need Donald Trump to break the Republicans' back on this, which may or may not be a consequence of his presidency. No way to tell yet. But again, as an issue, it was definitely more powerful than I did anticipate. So this is one of the many, many mistakes and misreadings that I had going into this election.
Certainly, and I think from what we can tell so far, a lot of Democrats stayed home, or at least a lot of Obama 2012 voters stayed home. And there are definitely a variety of possible reasons for that. I'm still with my overall thing that Trump voters, it's not purely economic anxiety motivating Trump's base. It's economic anxiety filtered through a lens of intense cultural and racial intolerance, and an overall sense of as we've also said before, not absolute economic anxiety, but comparative. Like, I'm making less than I used to be, I'm making less than my dad did, and also the neighborhood's changing. That I think is that ball of, various resentments, I think, powered the Trump candidacy. In terms of how Bernie would have done, I mean, whites-only socialism is much more popular in this country than Bernie's more progressive brand of the same. I'm not convinced that after 6 months of oppo in the general election, after having his most extreme statements put in ad after ad, and having ultimately a smaller organization and ground game behind him, and the potential of disaffected Hillary supporters not wanting to back him, I'm not convinced that he would automatically have done better. I think he could have done worse. For me, there's enough variables in there that I could argue it either way, and so for me that kind of cancels it out. Like, I'm not in, I don't think there's a clear case to be made that Bernie would have done better or worse. So for me, what's interesting now is who the Democrats are going forward, and what direction do they move, and it's tough because there is the argument that, okay, we need to do and we would need to do this anyway, do a much better and more focused job on job loss in the kind of communities that back Trump. And it's a very clear urban-rural divide to a certain extent as we look at the map for this election. But, I mean, we should do that anyway. We should do that regardless of how they vote, right? Like, that should just be a moral collective action. We need to do a better job of economic welfare and Social Security in these struggling left-behind areas. We need to do that regardless of how they would vote. I'm not convinced that would actually change how they'd vote, though. I'm not convinced that if they were making $10,000 a year more and their pensions weren't being gambled with on Wall Street, that they would be backing the Democrats or that they would be Bernie Sanders supporters. I'm not convinced of that because I think it's a lot more tribal than that and is tied up with a lot more identity issues. And I think the Republican Party is pushing into pure white nationalism territory. And someone like Bernie Sanders is not going to break through that.
That's what I was trying to allude to when I said the left-right dichotomy isn't really packing it, because of course you can describe many of what there is of economic policy positions of Trump as economically on the left. Somehow, an infrastructure stimulus and more protectionism is traditionally what you thought of as left-wing politics, but of course Trump is anything but a left-wing politician. So this is simply not that useful of a category. And I have argued, not here on a podcast, but I have been arguing for about 1 or 2 years now that instead of left or right, it makes more sense to talk in terms of open and closed. And this also plays much more into what you just said with the tribalism that is involved. Because what definitely won the election is a more closed image of a society. And again, this is not just an American issue. I am now pretty convinced that there is more than a decent chance that France will elect a right-wing leader next year, and that here in Germany our own right-wing populists will continue to be on the ascendancy. And so this conflict between an open society and a closed society seems to be much more at the forefront now, because that's how party lines basically fall. And this isn't quite a winning combination for the Democrats and left-wing parties, especially, because we had, in order to support all these open society ideas, we were also wed to the open market stuff.
Exactly.
Like the trade deals, because that also falls within the open-closed dichotomy. And so we got tarnished with an economic policy that was never at the heart of Democrats or other left-leaning parties to begin with, but that perversely we were basically the ones to defend. You know what I mean? This is the first really problematic conundrum that all left-wing parties need to somehow break without me knowing anything concrete about how. But if you don't get to break out of being wedded to an unpopular economic system, like being identified with it, you have a big problem. But another thought which I want to begin before I let you comment on this again, what really frustrates me about this election, beyond any words, is how my feeling here, so please take this as a trigger warning, basically, but how bad behavior and how the bad guys were rewarded for bad behavior. Because Republicans have breached so many political norms. They have blocked everything to the point where you have these necessities for a successful Clinton campaign, where you simply have to take into account there is basically giant voter suppression program going on that keeps you from winning the House even if you have more votes. So you have to accommodate for Republican economic policy. And because you are a responsible politician who doesn't overpromise stuff that he or she can't deliver on anyway, you lose. And now the guys win with it. This is what really frustrates me,
I see.
And this is also something that had frustrated me during the primaries, because Bernie all the time had the right points about, what would need to change, but never a real working explanation of how it would change. Maybe it was the wrong approach of Clinton to simply decide to call it a losing battle, and concentrate on areas where she could enact meaningful change, because obviously it was not enough to get Democrats out. And so to close this, if you want to call anyone stupid in this election for their choices, it's not Trump supporters, it's really the Democrats who stayed at home.
Absolutely. I mean, I can blame both. I can blame Hillary for not doing a good job executing and getting out people to vote. I can blame people who stayed home, which I do happily. An overall organizational, institutional failure on the left, I think it's fair to say, is what we saw here. Which again is why I was talking about how the party needs to reorganize itself going forward. And I completely agree with you about this election rewarding the worst kinds of behavior. I mean, look, the Republicans blockaded the Supreme Court, refused to allow Obama to appoint another justice, and it worked. Now that justice, unless they confirm Merrick Garland, which I doubt, exactly, your smirk is warranted. Now that opening will be filled by President Trump, and probably more than one, given how old a lot of the other justices are. So that worked. That norm-shattering, that utter transgression of how the basic functioning of the federal government is supposed to go, it succeeded. They have benefited from it. And that holds pretty much across the board when you look at how Trump ran his campaign. So it extends both personal and political. Politically, you can get away with blockading the Supreme Court. Personally, you can say that and do the vile things Trump has done to women and Muslims and immigrants and disabled people and still win. That, those lessons will be learned well by the right wing, especially the now ascendant alt-right. So that you can't, no matter what the Democrats do, you can't put Pandora back in that particular box. That's not going anywhere, and that's terrifying, because now the right has every reason to keep that up. It'll be interesting to see how the left responds to Trump's presidency in terms of norms, But it won't really matter, because if the Democrats abuse the filibuster to stop Trump, then Mitch McConnell will get rid of the filibuster. I mean, they won't. The Republicans have no particular loyalty to norms and institutions at this point, so they'll just respond by breaking stuff that they have to. Interesting question to go from there. So I talked a little bit about what I think the Democrats should do, which is, reorganize themselves more towards a Sanders-style party, even though, again, like I said, I still stand by my vote for Hillary in the primaries. For the Republicans, it's interesting because, Trump, for the most part, is going to be signing bills that Paul Ryan sends to his desk. I think the notion that they are going to be at war is overstated.
Absolutely.
Because Trump doesn't really care about most of this stuff. And he will take the path of least resistance, which for the most part is going to be signing Paul Ryan bills. He will put up a fight on several issues that he knows are big with the base. That's going to be trade and immigration. and trade and immigration and the overall anti-PC effect of Trump, his overall attitude, style, talking, dismissing people, dealing with the backlash, like that's going to stay there. Paul Ryan's going to have to deal with that for the next 4 years, and he'll put up a fight on immigration and trade, I imagine. But beyond that, he's going to be a standard issue Republican president, which is terrible. This will be the worst of all possible worlds, and unfortunately, that might do wonders for Republican cohesion. They might be able to pull this off if you can keep the alt-right happy with Trump standing his ground on immigration and trade. But then the Ryan wing of the party gets most everything they want. Oh, that might produce a successful and happy Republican Party, which is not something I enjoy thinking about. But the Democrats have the larger, I think, organizational work to do at this point. Republicans certainly have issues they're going to have to fight about. But right now, the Republicans are just so happy that that's going to pave over a lot of differences. Like, there's a lot of spoils to be handed out on the right. Let's just put it that way. There's a lot of little rewards they can give each other now that will paper over existing differences. I'm sure Ryan will let Trump take his stand where he has to, because Ryan knows he can get his budget passed now. So, organizationally, I think the Republicans are sadly in pretty good shape for the first Trump term. What do you think?
I have no clue at all how a Trump presidency will play out. And I think we will have just to wait until February, March to get a clearer picture of what this is going to be. It is very likely, I think, that it will develop as you said, but heck, it was very likely that Hillary Clinton got elected. So right now I'm very uncomfortable making such calls based on a data point of 0. Because for the first time, a person was elected with no previous government experience whatsoever. So we really don't know anything about how he will govern. We can make some educated guesses from prior behavior, but we simply cannot say. I am very pessimistic.
Foreign policy.
I might be proven wrong in either direction, but I think basically the worst of all possible worlds from a liberal standpoint is pretty much what's in store. What to switch gears just one more time.
Sure.
What I really hate right now when I'm reading up on my Twitter feed and articles and so on and so forth are all those self-flagellations that are going out there, always in the first person plural. Like, we need to get out of our filter bubble, and we all didn't understand this and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And right now, we don't even have the data yet to know why Clinton lost. Sure. I mean, I can tell you it's because she got fewer votes.
Exactly.
But really, that's about the extent of it. We have no clue yet. Is this just a repetition of 2014 with Democrats staying home? Then you have to ask the question, why? Was Hillary uninspiring? Were the issues uninspiring? Whatever. There are so many possibilities right now, and we simply don't know yet why. So we have to basically put our obituaries and our autopsy reports a little bit more into the future. And I think we will definitely talk about this again, but we cannot right now say what exactly the crux of the issue really was. But I'm pretty sure of one thing. If people are now saying all the time, oh my God, liberals were in a filter bubble, and we need to go out and recognize the real America. If you look at the numbers, really there were 2 filter bubbles of comparable size, and one shaped out to be just a tad bigger in the few places that counted. But really, it's not like there was one filter bubble of an establishment that has now been popped open. The problem of a divided country is still very much at hand. And we were wrong which side was a little bit stronger than the other. But that doesn't change the basic fact that there are 2 roughly equal sizes. and that it basically comes to base mobilization. The tribalism that we already talked about.
Sure.
So if you are going with your head covered in ash and thinking about, oh my God, we were totally living on a different planet, that's simply not true as far as I can see right now. I might be proved wrong on this as well by upcoming data, but this is my feeling at the moment.
Sure.
That this wasn't so much a total repudiation of what liberals stand for as mostly a lost election, really.
No, that's perfectly fair.
And I mean, Republicans didn't feel repudiated by 2 losses against Barack Obama either. And if you look at the current results, it seems like they were right not to be.
No, this isn't doomed. It's just a massive setback, and we need to, we need to just discern the best possible response to it, and certainly that includes digging into why. There's going to be a bunch of different theories tossed back and forth. Busting the bubble is always a good thing, but I think economically reaching out to Trump supporters might get you enough on the margins to win. Certainly, which is enough of a difference. I don't see a whole scale change in that regard coming. I think it's about existing, like you say, in these two very strongly divided, very polarized groups, and hoping ours gets a little bigger next time, and we got to find ways of doing that. In the meantime, hold the line against Trump as best we can. But you're right, a lot of it's unknown with him at this point. Foreign policy could be really in any possible direction with him, and it could change from day to day given his temperament. But the Democrats. It's so tough because she's winning the popular vote, and it's not like. This I can't count it as a decisive repudiation of anything, really. It's a question of whether she could have done better on the margins and how. And
it is really quite simple. Donald Trump won the election. The Republicans won the House of Representatives and the Senate, and so they can now basically do whatever the fuck they want.
Yep.
Paul Ryan already said they won a mandate, and hell yes, they did. You can argue that it was very close in swing states, and it was. And you can argue that emails and Comey and all of that contributed and all that kind of stuff. And it's all true. But it doesn't change the fact of the matter that this is an election that the Democrats lost, and they lost resoundingly, and they're in a really bad spot right now.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, the Democrats are now where the Republicans were in 2008.
Sure.
Shut out of the national government on all levels, except the Supreme Court, which is why the Republicans are even stronger now than the Democrats 2008. But still, this is not a situation that is totally earth-shattering and unheard of. What is unheard of is the nature of the candidate who won. But right now, again, we don't know how this will play out. So I'm simply reserving judgment on this for the moment. So please don't take this as any kind of coming around to Trump or proclaiming him harmless or anything.
No.
I just don't know yet.
This is perfectly fair, yeah.
It might be that the Democratic Party will make its own version of the autopsy report, that they will tap into some great piece of knowledge that gives them a fighting strategy. I wouldn't be too surprised if they too discovered the merits of total opposition and going in full attack mode and over-promising and further contributing to radicalization. They were the good guys until now. It didn't pay off. The electorate didn't reward them for it. I wouldn't be too surprised if they dabbed into the darker currents of democratic politics as well.
Sure.
I'm really not looking forward to this.
I agree.
But I wouldn't be surprised in any way about this. And as you said, regarding foreign policy, this is again something where it's really hard to see what will be happening. I mean, we here in Europe are apparently kind of on the fence about this, because if Trump really does what he talked about in the primaries and in the general election, which is a big if, then the United States will drastically decrease their commitment in any kind of foreign policy crisis.
Yep.
And politics is not kind to power vacuums, so someone will fill it. In the Pacific, the Chinese will get into it. In Europe, it will be the Russians. And because I don't see the EU taking over any American responsibilities.
Yep.
So this might lead to a more stable world, as Bernie and Trump supporters have proclaimed. I doubt it, but it might. Again, this will be, in quotation marks, interesting to watch.
Sure, I mean...
oh man, you see, you can see my rambling that I'm still
I agree, there's a lot of unknowns here.
This
is a very visceral episode, but... Yeah, I agree. I mean, of course, there's huge problems with how America exercises its power in the world, and there are definitely situations we make much worse. But the solution to that is not to give China, and especially Russia, a free hand. In the same way that, I definitely have problems with how the Democratic Party... with the Democratic Party's relationship to the financial sector. Definitely have problems with it. But the solution to that is not to elect a guy who wants to repeal Dodd-Frank and replace it with nothing. Like, there's no... I mean, the connection between the problem and the solutions to it are just... Like, again, for me, that's indicates that, the idea of having a more Bernie Sanders-style candidacy or paying more direct attention to jobs and Social Security in rural parts of the country, those are moral goods on their own. I don't think it's the key to assembling a winning coalition, because they didn't actually elect a populist. They elected a guy with a gold-plated bathroom who wants to give tax cuts and gets rid of Wall Street regulations. They elected a guy who talked tough, and that apparently was the qualification. So I'm not convinced that the substance of Trump's... I'm not convinced that if you that the Democrats adopt Trump's outsiderness or skepticism towards trade, that will be enough to win many of his supporters over. Might get some Democrats who sat out this election, so they're worth it for that. But I think that's as far as that coalition's going to go. And like you say, foreign policy is a complete. It can go any direction, and that is terrifying. I think that about does it for me. I mean, on my end, other things I would say would be sentimental. Be good to people who are going to suffer more than you are under this administration. That certainly applies to me. I'm going to lose my health care probably, but I still have it easy in a lot of ways because I'm a white dude. And just a lot of Trump's worst stuff simply doesn't apply to me. And to just, if you have the capacity to donate or volunteer for groups like the ACLU or various immigrants' rights groups or gay rights groups, they're really going to need it now. Because one thing you didn't even mention is that Mike Pence is now going to be the vice president. And that's terrifying, too, in a large variety of ways, given this man's past. So, if you can, now is the time to support and network and help out and do things in that regard, even when you don't feel like it. And, a lot of it now is going to be about what kind of left and what kind of Democratic Party we want to be on this side of the pond in response. And that's going to be where you got to put your energy and optimism right now, I think, while we wait to see exactly how bad this plays out. It's just a question of how bad at this point, not whether it's going to be bad. It's just how bad. But that about does it for me, good sir. How about you on your side of the pond? Any further comments?
No, not right now. I think we will get into this in a more structured manner, so please see this as kind of an unrefined diamond of an episode here.
Well put.
So I just agree with what you just said, and I wish you all on your side of the pond the best of luck.
Absolutely. So in future podcasts, presumably we'll get into how the Trump-elect administration is beginning to look, as we get more information about the election, what further conclusions we can draw, and as we see how the Democrats are going forward. So we will see you to discuss those nascent movements in a couple weeks. Thank you for listening. You have been listening to The Atlantic Bridge, a podcast about politics viewed from both sides of the pond, with Emmett Booth and Stefan Sasse. New episodes out every fortnight on Friday. You can find us on Tumblr and YouTube and on our own personal sites at poorquentin.tumblr.com and deliberationdaily.de. Thanks for listening.